In the shadows of conflict between Palestine and Israel, there's this intriguing letter. A brief note penned on the 2nd of November, 1917, by none other than Britain's Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour. Addressed mysteriously to a headliner of the community, Lionel Walter Rothschild, its contents would ignite tensions that no one, perhaps not even the British government, foresaw would rage on for the next century. But who's right and who's wrong in this Israel-Palestine conflict? What are they really fighting about? And what role, one might wonder, did the British government play in this ever-unfolding drama? Let's discover together. Before the First World War, Palestine was a peaceful region where Muslims were the majority, but they coexisted peacefully with Jews and Christians. The land was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which spanned from Europe to northern Africa and large parts of the Middle East. Some Arab leaders in Palestine were unhappy under the Ottoman rule and wanted independence. They secretly approached the British for help. The British, sensing an opportunity, promised the Arabs freedom if they helped them fight the Ottomans. But here's the catch: the British also made a promise to the Jews in Europe. The Jews in Europe, from the beginning, have always been a community without a fixed abode in the world. This means they did not have a country of their own. Wherever they lived, they were called a minority. The Jews present in Europe were already facing many difficulties. They were looked at with eyes of hatred, and in many places, they were even killed. But why was this? The reason behind this is a religious conflict. For many centuries, Christians believed that it was the Jews who were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. This very main conflict was the reason why Christians in Europe did not tolerate Jews. The global network of the Jewish community, which is strong today, was also quite strong back then. They used to refer to their movement to get a separate country in Palestine as Zionism. The start of this movement was in 1896 by a renowned political activist named Theodore Herzl, who wrote a book, the English translation of which becomes The State. In it, he wrote that if Jews in Europe want to live a peaceful life, they will have to establish a separate country in Palestine. In the beginning, many Jews were against this concept. They were opposed. They said, "Why should we leave our country due to the hatred against Jews?" But soon, this movement transformed into a political shape. Jews from all over the world started favoring the idea. They began to get funding from their own community. They were also given money to set up businesses and factories there. The British government had promised the European Jews that they would be given a chance to establish their own country in Palestine. In 1917, during World War I, the Ottoman Empire was facing a severe defeat. On the 2nd of November 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter addressed to Walter Rothschild, a Britisher and a community headliner. The letter stated that the British Convention had decided that Jews could come to Palestine and establish their own country. Rothschild was assured that the British government would fully support this endeavour, and it was also written that this would not harm the Muslims already residing there. A month after Balfour's letter, British soldiers arrived and ended the 400-year reign of the Ottoman Empire in Palestine. But the question is, what did the British government want in return for giving Jews their own country? In reality, the British only wanted one thing: after the departure of the Ottoman Empire, they desired a state that could support them in the future, effectively acting as their ally. That's why they promised a separate country to the Jews, but in return, they extracted a promise from the Jews that they wouldn't abandon the Britishers after establishing their country. Historically, victorious nations would seize and rule over the defeated. As World War I concluded, Palestine came under Britain's domain. They made every effort to colonize it and were largely successful. But the native Palestinians believed they were wronged, for Britain never consulted them about their freedom. In 1919, Arthur Balfour drafted a memorandum, stating there was no need to inquire about the wishes of the Arabs already residing in Palestine. The implications were clear. The fate of the land and its people was now in the hands of foreign powers, playing their geopolitical games. The Arab Palestinians voiced their concerns over the increasing allocation of their lands to Jewish settlers. Protesting against the British administration, they faced severe repercussions including arrests, banishment, and even execution. In response to the unrest, the British government established a commission, which suggested the division of Palestine into two parts. However, this solution was rejected by the Arab Palestinians. The situation escalated, leading the British to release the White Paper in 1939, which placed restrictions on Jewish immigration to Palestine and the purchase of Arab lands by Jews already present. It also proposed that Palestine should become an independent state within 10 years. The Zionists viewed the White Paper as a betrayal. They refused to accept it and launched attacks on the British government, leading to a further deterioration of the situation. However, the onset of World War II in 1939 shifted global attention. The Holocaust resulted in the brutal extermination of 6 million European Jews by Hitler. Survivors of the Holocaust saw Palestine as their only refuge, due to its religious significance and the established Jewish community there. This situation further intensified the Arab-Jewish conflict in Palestine, with the British mandate caught in between. The British had significant challenges in controlling Palestine, leading them to decide to withdraw in 1947. Consequently, the issue of the Palestinian territory was then taken up by the United Nations, UN. In Palestine at that time, there were around 630,000 Jews, in comparison to 1,430,000 Christians and 1,181,000 Muslims. An Italian demographer provided these statistics, emphasizing that the Muslim population clearly doubled that of the Jews. Despite this disparity, the United Nations proposed a partition plan that allocated 55% of the land to the Jews. This proposal was accepted with 72% votes in the UN General Assembly. Questions arose about the rationale behind granting 55% of the land to a population, Jews, that only constituted around 30%. India, being present in the UN Assembly, voted against this decision. India's Prime Minister at that time, Jawaharlal Nehru, raised concerns and even claimed that the UN's Indian ambassador was bribed by Zionists to vote in their favor. The UN's resolution was rejected by many countries, leading to tensions between Zionist Jews and Palestinians. Clashes ensued, and given the stronger military presence of the Jews, they had an advantage. In 1948, David Ben-Gurion officially declared the State of Israel. He became its first prime minister. Following this, several Arab countries jointly decided to attack Israel, opposing both its formation and the UN's previous vote. This became the First Arab-Israel War. Despite being newly established and relatively smaller in size, Israel, with support from Western countries and a robust military, managed to defeat the 5 Arab nations that attacked it. After the war, areas of Palestine demarcated by the UN were occupied by Israel. The West Bank went under Jordan's control, while the Gaza Strip came under Egypt. In 1967, another Arab-Israeli war occurs in which Israel not only captures the West Bank but also the Gaza Strip and the entire Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. Amidst all this, the people of Palestine want to establish their own country. For this purpose, they created their own organization, named PLO, or Palestine Liberation Organization. Initially, they took up arms to forcefully try to establish their own country. To raise their voice, they hijacked many planes and ships, leading the US and Israel to declare the PLO as a terrorist organization. However, many countries didn't view the PLO as a terrorist organization but rather as a revolutionary group wanting their own country. In 1974, the PLO is officially recognized in the United Nations. They represent the Palestinian people. Later in 1979, peace talks between Egypt and Israel succeed, and Egypt becomes the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel. In return, Israel gives back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. However, 2 years later, Egypt's prime minister is assassinated by extremist groups because he had made peace with Israel. Due to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank for so many years, many Jews began settling there, but the international community objects to this as according to the 1947 United Nations Partition Plan, the West Bank was originally designated for Palestine. Yet, Israel started settling its people there. In 1992, talks happen again between Israel and the PLO. PLO's leader, Yasser Arafat, recognizes Israel, and the Israeli PM also recognizes the PLO, admitting that they are not a terrorist organization. During this time, the PLO splits. Another faction emerges which believes that there shouldn't be any compromise with Israel. This faction is known today as Hamas. On the other side, an extremist group in Israel also opposes any compromise with Palestine. But this didn't affect the peace talks. For the first time, the PLO and Israel sat face to face trying to resolve the issue. But the problem was that many Israelis had already built their homes in the West Bank. So a solution was proposed to divide the West Bank into 3 parts, A, B and C. Area A would be under the control of the Palestinians or PLO. Area B would be under the control of both, and Area C would be completely under Israel's control. Such an agreement was made. In 1995, something suddenly happened that shattered the peace talk. This extremist group assassinated their own prime minister. They did not want any Palestinians to settle around the West Bank at any cost. In 1996, the first election takes place in Palestine, and the first Palestinian government is formed. However, Hamas, the militant wing of Palestine, is not happy with this and boycotts the election. Not only that, but they also instigate several suicide bombings in Israel, which increases the hatred between Israelis and Palestinians. After this incident, there are regular clashes between the two. To prevent this, Israel constructs a concrete wall around its settlements in the West Bank, making life more difficult for Palestinians. Then, in 2006, another election takes place in Palestine and this time Hamas wins. This sparks a civil war between the Fatah party of the PLO and Hamas, splitting Palestine into 2. Today, Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, and in small pockets in the West Bank, there is the government of the PLO or Fatah. Most of the skirmishes between Israel and Hamas involve rockets being fired from Gaza onto Israel. This is why Israel has tightly encircled the Gaza Strip and erected a large fence. Every 2 or 3 years, the war between Hamas and Israel intensifies. The last time this happened was in 2021, and now, on October 7, 2023, Hamas fired over 5,000 rockets on Israel.